My First Trip Out of State by Anonymous Traveler 914. I was 21 years old when this happened. I had never left my home state before, but at the time, there was a major outbreak going on. My friends never took the situation too seriously, so on a whim, we decided to take a trip. I was beyond excited. For privacy reasons, I won't be using our actual names, but there were 4 of us: Jake, Brianna, Tyler, and me, Samantha. Now, our group was really into the strange and unexplained. Ghost stories, cryptid sightings, demonology, all of it. I personally had been involved in spiritual practices since I was 12. So, believe the story however you like, but the fear I felt was very real. Our destination was Shadow Ridge, West Virginia, and from there we'd head into Pennsylvania. We stopped by the Mothman Museum, and everyone was having a great time. The next day, some locals mentioned the abandoned bunkers hidden along some trails just off a back road. Our curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to check them out in the daylight. We spent hours hiking, taking pictures, and even leaving our mark with some graffiti inside one of the bunkers. Pretty standard tourist stuff, nothing unusual yet. However, one part of the woods near the trail made me feel uneasy. Something about it felt off. Later that evening, after dinner, we decided to go back to the trails for the full experience. At night, the forest was alive. The sound of frogs, insects, rustling leaves, and the overwhelming summer heat surrounded us. This time, we took a different path. The woods here were dense, so thick we would have needed a machete just to push through. So we decided to stay on the trail. With our flashlights in hand, Jake and Tyler walked ahead, searching for anything out of the ordinary. Brianna and I followed behind, chatting as we walked. We could still hear the guys. Tyler was always loud. Then suddenly we heard them shouting. They had come across what looked like a summoning sight. Melted candles, wax drippings, and something that resembled blood covering the floor inside a bunker. We immediately yelled back that we wanted no part of it and continued along the trail. As interesting as it sounded, neither of us was eager to deal with whatever might have been conjured, or whoever may have left it there. The guys caught up with us, and we continued walking, laughing, and joking. But then the mood shifted. The night fell disturbingly silent. No insects, no frogs, nothing. We all stopped in our tracks. Brianna, Tyler, and I had grown up around hunting, and we knew that silence like this in the wild was never a good sign. Jake, about 10 feet ahead, turned to us, confused. Then, from about 30 feet into the thick forest, we heard it, Jake's voice. But Jake was right in front of us. His mouth never moved. Panic set in immediately. My heart pounded. I wanted to run, so I did. I bolted toward the van, Tyler right beside me. As we ran, we noticed a dim light flickering through the trees, and something was moving towards the trail. I didn't stop to find out what it was. Brianna, Tyler, and I reached the van, but Jake lagged behind. Maybe curiosity held him back, but even he never saw what had called out in his voice. None of us ever figured out what it was. To this day, there's no explanation. Jake was frustrated, wanting to witness whatever it was firsthand, but my gut told me that it was best none of us had seen it up close. A few days later, we left West Virginia and made it to Pennsylvania. We decided to stay in a hotel for the first night. As we unpacked, Tyler, who was newer to all things supernatural, decided to joke around and loudly called out a name we were always told not to say. I had warned him a million times never to speak it aloud. I wasn't sure whether to be angry or scared. To make matters worse, our hotel room was on the ground floor, with a window facing the woods near the parking lot. Needless to say, I barely slept that night. Nothing happened, but the feeling of unease stayed with me. The next day, we moved to a campsite by a cold, rushing river. That night, the forest was alive with sound, completely opposite from the eerie silence we had experienced before. We had truly found a perfect spot. On the second day, we explored some state land and decided to hike up a mountain. We had walkie-talkies so we could stay in contact as we split into 2 groups. Tyler and I took the right side while Brianna and Jake went left. The plan was to meet at a small creek in the middle. Soon, I felt it again, that heaviness in the air. The forest suddenly felt suffocating. The birds stopped singing. Then our walkie-talkie crackled. It was Jake. Keep in mind, we weren't seriously searching for anything paranormal, mostly just enjoying nature. But his voice over the walkie sounded odd. "Weird stuff over here. You guys find anything?" We replied, "Not really. We'll meet you in 5 minutes." The trail steepened, and when we reached the creek, Brianna was sitting down. Her hip was hurting too much to continue. She and I decided to stay behind while the guys went ahead, promising to check in frequently. Brianna and I chatted mostly about food since we were both starving. Then we heard it. A loud, deep snort, like a large animal exhaling sharply. We scanned the area but saw nothing. Feeling uneasy, we radioed the guys, only to find out that Tyler and Jake had separated. Back at the van, Brianna and I relaxed, eating fruit and enjoying the sun. Then my walkie-talkie went off. It was Tyler. "Hey, there's a tree down up here and a doorknob? Weird, right?" I advised him to leave it alone. It could belong to someone living off the grid. 20 minutes passed. Then, the forest around us fell silent again. A sickening dread crept up my spine. I stepped out of the van and scanned the trees. Brianna grabbed the walkie and called for a check-in. Nothing. Then we heard running fast, desperate. Tyler came crashing through the trees, drenched in sweat, struggling to breathe. He sprinted toward me, barely able to speak before he bent over and vomited. When he finally caught his breath, his story sent chills through me. While walking back from the lake, he had heard my voice calling him from the trees. But it wasn't me. It was emotionless, wrong. "Tyler, come here," it had said, but nothing was there. Then again, "Tyler." It was mocking him. Instinct took over and he ran, blindly, until he realized he was lost. The silence pressed in on him. Then, a twig snapped behind him. He ran faster than ever before until he finally saw the van and me standing there. The moment he burst out of the tree line, the sounds of the forest returned, as if whatever had been stalking him had vanished. But then we realized Jake wasn't back yet. We frantically radioed him until, finally, he responded. Completely unaware of what had just happened, he casually strolled out of the trees, excited about his hike. We left immediately. To this day, Tyler has nightmares. He dreams of something with towering antlers chasing him, grabbing his leg, slamming him into a tree. And every time he wakes up shaking, terrified. Believe what you want, but if you go searching for the unknown, be careful, and never ever say its name. The following happened to me during a hike in a wooded area near a small town in Tennessee. Those familiar with the region might be able to guess exactly where, but I won't specify because I don't want anyone else wandering into the place after what I experienced. I'm a passionate hiker and love exploring new trails. I had been trekking through this particular set of trails for about a year and had just one left to explore. That's where I encountered something strange. It was early March 2024, just a few days ago as I write this. I located the trailhead and made my way along the unfamiliar path with ease. Just before reaching the end, I noticed something off in the woods ahead. At first, I thought it was a large camping backpack, but as I got closer, I realized that wasn't the case at all. It was a sizable piece of artificial rock wall, seemingly made of lightweight material like foam or plastic. I brushed it off and followed a trail of scattered debris leading down the ridge. There were discarded household items everywhere. Among them, I spotted a small bottle of alcohol and a couple of used syringes. My curiosity got the better of me, and I veered away from the main trail, trying to figure out why all this junk was here. The land sloped sharply downward toward a river. Then I noticed something deeper in the valley and moved in for a better look. It was the remains of a collapsed shack. Standing on a rocky outcrop, I gazed down at the wreckage. The only way to reach it would have been to climb down the rock face, which I wasn't willing to risk. The shack had clearly been thrown together from sheets of metal, now buckled and falling apart. Surrounding the wreckage were heaps of household goods, mostly decayed food containers. Some trees had toppled onto the remains, yet the cut stumps suggested they hadn't fallen naturally. It seemed like someone had deliberately chopped them down, both the ones above and below the shack. The ones below leaned outward at an unnatural angle. It was odd. This was public land meant for recreation, so why would someone build a cabin here? And even stranger, why would they intentionally cut down trees onto it? I couldn't tell if the trees had caused the collapse or had been felled afterward. I snapped a few photos with my phone, studying the eerie scene. That's when something moved below the wreckage. Through the tangle of fallen trees and broken walls, I glimpsed two large legs shifting around. My immediate thought was something out of a cryptid tale, maybe a huge animal. I pulled my phone back out and started recording. The figure rustled through the debris, but I couldn't make out any details. It was just a dark shape thrashing about. At first, I considered the possibility of a deer, but then I saw something more defined, a human figure emerging from the wreckage. My heart jumped. I had no idea who this person was or what they were doing, but I took off running back up the slope. My mind raced. Was it a squatter? A dangerous person involved in illegal activity? I sprinted to the trail and sat to catch my breath. My fear was quickly overtaken by curiosity. Who was this person, and why were they rummaging beneath that wreckage? It seemed like a hazardous place to be, with the trees pressing against the remains. After resting, I decided to take another look. Moving in from a different angle, I crept closer. The person was still making noise, apparently unaware of me. Then I heard a distinct cough, confirming it was definitely human. I also heard the sound of shifting materials, sheet metal being dragged and wood knocking against wood. It didn't sound like a hammer was being used, but rather something heavier striking objects. At that point, my nerves got the better of me and I left. I only caught glimpses, a pair of dark pants and possibly a red jacket. That was all. I wasn't going to stick around and risk being seen. I had a few theories about what they were doing. Maybe a homeless person salvaging materials for shelter, or even a park worker clearing debris. I wasn't sure, and I still don't know. What I did know was that something about it unsettled me, so I walked away. I shared the photos I had taken, though I hadn't examined them closely yet. A link to them is in the description. #update. 4 days later, I returned to the site with my brother after telling him and some of my family members about what happened. When we arrived, the fake rock wall had been moved. It was now farther down in the ravine. That meant someone had been there recently. We found a baseball cap and a tote bag from a local amusement park. Even stranger, there was a pair of sweatpants lying around. We carefully made our way toward the cabin remains, comparing them to the photos I'd taken. The wreckage had been disturbed. Things had definitely been rearranged. As we debated whether to climb down and investigate further, the sun began to set. I hesitated, thinking it wasn't worth it since darkness was setting in. My brother, however, found the idea exciting. We enjoyed spooky adventures and often sought out eerie places while hiking. This time, though, something real happened. Listening carefully, we heard nothing unusual, just the rustling of small animals in the underbrush. My brother decided to call out, ensuring we didn't startle anyone. We even joked around, referencing an online urban legend. As we moved downhill, I noticed the sound of trickling water, something I hadn't heard before, but I dismissed it as runoff from the rocks. By now, it was getting too dark to see clearly, so I picked up a heavy glass bottle for defense while my brother grabbed a large rock. We came across an overturned chair resting on a fallen log. We had passed the shack's ruins and now crouched to observe the spot where I had seen the person before. That's when I froze. Beneath the wreckage, hidden in the ridge among the trees, stood a newly constructed shack. It was bright white, probably made of fresh sheet metal. That meant the person had been building something after all. Suddenly, this didn't feel like a harmless mystery anymore. Someone was actively living here. If they had a reason to stay hidden, it could mean danger for us. Then I saw movement, a dark shadow against the shack's white wall. It seemed motionless, possibly just a stump, but I wasn't sure. I called out, "Hello!" Silence. A bad feeling crept over me. My brother and I agreed to get a slightly better view before leaving. Now it was pitch black. My brother used his phone light while I filmed on mine. We whispered, speculating about strange things, half hoping for a supernatural encounter. Then we heard it. A firm voice came from inside the shack. "Y'all better get out of here before you get shot." That was all we needed. Trying to stay calm, I called back, "Okay, we're leaving." My brother was already scrambling up the ridge. I asked, "Is this private property?" No answer. We bolted, clawing at the mud, scraping our hands and knees on the rocks. I dropped the bottle I had been carrying so I could climb faster. I wasn't too worried about being shot. I didn't hear footsteps behind us, but I wasn't taking chances. Reaching the main trail, we kept moving until we emerged back into town. My brother guessed the guy had been bluffing. Maybe, but I wasn't about to find out. Our goal had been to see what was down there, and now we knew. The shack had been newly built and looked sturdy, yet it stood on dangerous terrain. I'm convinced it was a homeless person making shelter, and he clearly didn't want anyone discovering his presence until he had no choice. I don't plan on going back, but I can't stop wondering, what was he doing out there that made him willing to threaten strangers just for getting too close? I'm a big fan of horror, and I've been following this podcast for years. I've always wanted to share my own experience, and recently, something happened that I'll never be able to forget. I'm a 42-year-old man, 6'3", with an athletic build, and I live in Oregon. I love hiking and walking, usually going on trips with my wife, my 3-year-old child, and my 105-pound Anatolian Shepherd puppy. One evening, around 8:30 p.m., I decided to go on a hike. My wife was exhausted after a long day at work, and honestly, I was pretty drained too. I had a rough day at the office and almost got into an argument with a coworker. However, I had heard about this trail that was supposed to be stunning under the moonlight, and I always found night walks to be peaceful. I decided to take my dog, Atlas, and my .44 revolver for safety, since crime rates had been increasing in my area. I drove to the trail and started my walk while Atlas explored, sniffing around the rocks and bushes. We were about halfway through when he stopped to relieve himself. As I waited, I suddenly heard the sound of crunching leaves. Then, a whispering voice said, "Over here. I've trained in kickboxing, so I'd like to think I can handle myself in a fight." I turned, ready to confront whoever was there. But before I could react, Atlas barked sharply and bolted straight into the trees. He disappeared into the woods next to the trail. Yelling his name, I ran after him, crashing through branches and undergrowth. My heart pounded as I chased after him, calling out repeatedly. Then, I slammed into something solid and fell to the ground, mud soaking into my new hiking pants. I quickly got to my feet, but when I looked up, I froze. Standing right in front of me was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It reminded me of the so-called shy guy from urban legends, but larger, easily 10 feet tall, with unnaturally long limbs. Its pale skin was stretched tightly over its gaunt frame, and its lifeless white eyes stared through me. Slobber and blood dripped from its lips. I was paralyzed with fear, only able to mutter 3 words. "What is that?" Its mouth opened wide, unleashing an ear-splitting shriek that sounded like a blend of a man's scream, a bear's roar, and a wolf's howl. My body moved before my mind did. I staggered backward, whispering the same words again. "What is that?" Then, in a blink, it dropped to all fours and lunged at me. I barely had time to react. My hands moved on instinct, yanking my revolver from my waistband. I fired 2 shots. The first bullet slammed into its chest, making it let out a blood-curdling wail. The second knocked it off its feet, but within seconds, it rose again, thick, dark liquid seeping from its wounds. Then it started sprinting forward once more. A chill ran down my spine as I realized my bullets were barely slowing it down. I turned and ran, screaming for help as twigs snapped and branches cracked behind me. I fired again, but the creature kept coming, absorbing the shots like they were nothing. That was the most terrifying part. How could something take this much damage and still keep going? What was this thing? And if creatures like this existed, why weren't they caught on camera? I didn't have time to think about it. It was foaming at the mouth, spit and blood flying everywhere as it moved at a speed far beyond mine. Then, just like in a bad horror movie, I tripped on a rock. My body crashed onto the ground, and pain shot through me as I twisted my ankle. I tried to scramble up, but I couldn't move fast enough. The thing leaped into the air, aiming right for me. My heart stopped. Then, in an instant, a loud crash rang out. Atlas had slammed his full weight into the creature's head. My dog was on top of it, biting and clawing at its limbs. The monster thrashed and howled, trying to shake him off, but Atlas held firm, tearing into its flesh. I forced myself up, aiming my gun again. I saw an opening and took the shot. The thing shrieked and convulsed but refused to go down. Suddenly, the part of its body that Atlas had been clamping onto ripped away, sending my dog flying. The beast let out an unearthly scream, clutching at the exposed flesh. It turned to me, hatred burning in its hollow eyes. With no other choice, I called Atlas and ran. Every ounce of adrenaline in my body pushed me forward, overriding the pain in my ankle. The two of us sprinted through the trees, desperate to escape. I didn't dare look back until we broke through the tree line. Only when I saw nothing behind me did I let out a shaky breath of relief. But then, a chilling sound echoed through the night, the same eerie howl the creature had made before. I wasted no time. Atlas and I bolted down the trail, practically leaping into my car. I slammed the door shut, turned the key, and sped away, dust kicking up behind us. When I got home, I told my wife everything. Of course, she didn't believe me. She thought I had simply gone to a bar, had a few too many drinks, and made up some wild story. But she did insist that I stop hiking at night. She also wanted to know why Atlas's mouth was bloodied and why my ankle was so swollen. Without another word, she took me to the hospital. Atlas was fine, and thankfully so was I. As a thank you for saving my life, I gave him the biggest, juiciest steak I could find. To this day, I believe that what I encountered was something ancient and dangerous, something like the legends of the Wendigo. After doing some research, I realized many stories mention these creatures following people home after an encounter. Thankfully, I haven't seen it again, and I pray I never will. Since that night, I've avoided that trail and rarely go hiking anymore. When I do, I always bring my gun and, more importantly, my dog, just in case. The forest can be an eerie place. I know this all too well. I love spending time in the woods, especially during hunting season. Over the years, I've seen and heard some unsettling things out there, but this particular experience was different from anything before. Hunting season had ended about a month before, and as I write this, I can still feel the impact of what happened that day. I had been sitting in a ground blind in a section of woods that stretched out from the treeline, a narrow strip of forest reaching roughly halfway between the road and the rest of the treeline, bordered by fields on both sides. Behind me was a low-lying, marshy area, a sort of natural dip in the land. To my left, about 20 yards away, was a small gully, about 5 feet deep, with a creek flowing along its bottom. The slope leading into it was gentle, making for an easy descent. The gully ran parallel to the northern side of my blind before curving slightly and leveling out to the east. My blind sat about a third of the way from the wooded area to the tip of this strip of trees. The blind itself was octagonal, with 4 latched windows that could be opened or closed. Each window faced a primary direction. I had been sitting facing east, looking deeper into the forest, with the road about 130 yards behind me. The entrance to the blind was positioned behind me and to my left. By this time, the wind had picked up, blowing in from the north, so I shut that window. I also always kept the window facing the road closed for safety reasons during firearm season. After about 2 hours of sitting in my blind with not even a squirrel in sight, I suddenly heard footsteps, or at least, that's what I think they were. The sound of crunching leaves echoed behind me, slightly to my left. It struck me as strange because whatever was making the sound was too close. I should have heard it approaching sooner. My best guess was that it had come up from the marshy area behind me, a spot deer often used as a bedding ground. I readied my rifle, expecting a deer to step into my view at any moment. I didn't turn around because I didn't want to make any noise, and opening a window might spook it. But this wasn't a deer. The steps were too deliberate, too heavy. It sounded like a person walking. At first, I wasn't too concerned. I figured my dad had come to check on me, but then I realized, no, he wouldn't just show up without calling or texting first. Maybe it was one of our hunting buddies. His tree stand wasn't far from mine, or possibly even the game warden who had been especially active this season. Regardless, the footsteps stopped just short of my blind's entrance, about 4 feet away. Expecting to see someone, I carefully unlatched a window to peek outside rather than open the door, which would have been more difficult and noisy. But when I looked out, I was shocked to see nothing. No person, no animal, just the empty woods. I shook my head, telling myself I was just overthinking things, and shut the window, settling back into my chair. But within seconds, the footsteps resumed. This time, they moved past the door, stopping directly to my left. They were close, undeniably real. Someone or something was moving outside my blind. Heart pounding, I reached for the latch and flung the window open again, expecting to catch sight of whatever was out there. I scanned the ground, thinking it might be a squirrel or some small animal rustling through the leaves. But again, nothing. No movement, no creature, just the empty space where I knew I had heard those steps. A chill ran down my spine. The sound had been crystal clear, just a few feet away. If I had reached my arm out, I should have been able to touch whatever had been there. But there was nothing. I shut the window, sat back down, and waited. Sure enough, the footsteps started again. They moved forward but didn't quite enter my line of sight. Instead, they veered left, heading northeast. I didn't even bother opening the window this time. I just listened as the sounds gradually descended down the slope into the gully, stopping at the creek below. Leaning forward, I strained to see into the ravine. I could tell exactly where the footsteps had gone, but whatever it was had already dipped below my view. Then the steps halted completely. Silence. My mind was racing. What had I just heard? Was it real? Was it still there, just out of sight? Then, something clicked in my memory. About 8 years ago, an old family friend had passed away. He was the father of the friend I mentioned earlier, the one with the nearby tree stand. After his passing, he had been cremated, and his ashes were spread in that very creek, the same spot where the footsteps had stopped. In that moment, I suddenly knew exactly who I had heard. I knew that old Hunter had been checking to see who was in the blind that day. I have no doubt he was pleased to see me there, keeping the tradition alive, the way he used to say, passing it down to the next generation. Not all ghostly encounters are frightening or sinister. Some, like this one, can even bring a sense of comfort. For me, this experience will always be one to remember. When I was around 10 or maybe 11, my family and I moved deep into the countryside, out to a remote area filled with old, abandoned mining sites in rural Georgia. It was an exciting place for a kid. There were quarries to swim in, rusted machinery scattered everywhere, cliffs to climb, caves to explore, and endless dirt paths and forgotten roads from the mining days. The downside? A lot of venomous snakes, and when night fell, it was pitch dark. No streetlights, just the occasional porch light every mile or so along the main road. One summer morning, my friend Jay and I decided to explore a dirt path that branched off the main mining road. It was around 10 a.m., bright and sunny, so we figured we'd check it out. We had walked for about a mile when we came to a left turn. Right next to it, stretching alongside the road we were on, was a small lake. We wandered over to the edge, watching tiny frogs and a turtle moving through the water. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something across the lake. Someone was there. A man. He was walking away from us, heading up the hill. I nudged Jay and pointed. "Who is that? What's he doing way out here?" We were deep in the old mining trails, miles from any homes or people. It didn't make sense for anyone to be there. As soon as we stood up, the man froze mid-step. Then, in an instant, he spun around and sprinted straight toward us. We ran, hard, full speed. I glanced back, and he was moving faster than any person should. He had to cover a huge distance, down the hill, around the lake, to reach us at least 300 yards. Yet, in mere seconds, he was nearly there. Jay grabbed me, and we dove off the road into a ditch behind some thick brush. I peeked through the leaves. The man was only 30, maybe 40 feet away. He spun in circles in the middle of the road, letting out strange, guttural noises. And, bizarrely, he was clutching what looked like an entire roasted chicken in one hand. His appearance was terrifying. He wore filthy, torn overalls and old, mud-caked boots. His forehead jutted out unnaturally far over his deep-set eyes. It reminded me of something out of prehistoric times. Even though my memory might not be perfect, I swear his brow stuck out a good few inches. He was the most unsettling thing I had ever seen. He kept spinning around, making those awful sounds, then suddenly bolted back the way he came. Jay and I remained in that ditch for nearly an hour, too scared to move, listening for any sign he was still out there. When we finally felt safe, we crawled along the roadside, staying hidden in the underbrush until we reached the main mining road. From there, we stuck to the tree-line until we spotted the main paved road. Then we sprinted all the way home. When we got there, we told our dads. They wasted no time. Both our fathers, along with Jay's older brothers, grabbed their guns and went searching for the man. They found nothing, no sign of him at all. Even after all these years, that moment still haunts me. Fast forward to recently. My girlfriend took me to visit her grandmother's house to meet her family. And where does her grandmother live? Right on the edge of those same old mining grounds. I told her the story, and she got real serious. "You're lucky," she said. "All kinds of bad things have happened out there. So yeah, every visit to Grandma's now means the shotgun and the Glock come with us." Hashtag a chilling discovery. I almost forgot to mention this part until I was talking to my dad about writing the story down. He reminded me of something. On my last day of summer school that year, I got into a bad fight and took a beating. To cheer me up and reward me for passing, my parents got me a Kawasaki dirt bike. My dad had an old Honda racing bike, so we'd go riding whenever we could. One day, we were way out in the abandoned mining grounds when I spotted something off the road in the bushes. A long wooden box or crate. It was about 6 feet long and maybe 1.5 feet high. Being a curious kid, I walked over and looked inside. Inside, there was a bunch of hay, a tattered blanket, and an old pillow. Someone had been sleeping there. I called my dad over to see. He took one look at it, then glanced around. His expression changed. "If someone's living out here," he said, "they don't want to be found. Let's head home." We jumped on our bikes and rode back without any trouble. But that night, my dad sat outside on the front porch in the dark for hours, just staring at the tree-line. He never explained why. And strangely enough, I never thought to connect those two events until now. Maybe he saw something, or maybe he was just making sure nothing had followed us home. My experience happened about a year ago. My father and I often go hunting on a piece of land that has been in our family for generations. This land borders an old battlefield park in Mississippi. There are plenty of legends about the area, and people say a medical camp was set up there during the Civil War. The woods always gave me an eerie feeling, like someone was watching me. One morning, I got ready for a hunt, grabbing my .30-06 rifle, and went to ask my dad to join me. He had fallen ill the night before and decided to stay home. So, I hopped into my '96 Mustang and drove to the old homestead. I arrived around 5:30 a.m., loaded my rifle, and headed to the deer stand, which was about 100 yards into the forest. Like always, the woods made me uneasy, but this time, something felt different, almost peaceful. I started walking, but about halfway there, I heard heavy footsteps behind me. I froze, listening carefully. The steps continued for 2 more beats, then stopped. It was still dark, so I couldn't see much. I kept walking but remained on high alert, ensuring my rifle was ready since panthers and wildcats roam these parts. When I reached the deer stand, I stepped inside, locked the door, and positioned my chair near the window. The forest seemed livelier than usual. Birds chirping, squirrels scurrying. I sat for about 30 minutes without seeing any deer or hearing anything unusual. Bored, I pulled out my phone and started browsing online when I suddenly noticed the woods had gone completely silent. No birds, no crickets, nothing. It was unnerving. I tucked my phone away and gripped my rifle, sitting up to scan the area. At first, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, so I tried to relax and return to my phone. After another 10 minutes, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. I jolted, my phone slipping from my hands. Heart pounding, I grabbed my rifle and stood up, scanning the trees for any sign of a predator. Time passed, and I convinced myself it was just my imagination. As I tried to calm down, I suddenly heard my father's voice calling my name. "Eli, get back here now." Every hair on my body stood on end. I whipped my head around, but no one was there. Checking my phone's location app, I saw my dad was still at home. A deep chill settled in my gut. I slowly turned back toward the woods, more alert than ever. That's when I caught movement in my peripheral vision, something darting behind a bush. I stared at that spot for several minutes before carefully putting my phone away. I gripped my rifle tightly and unlocked the deer stand door. Just as I was about to step out, the voice came again, this time softer but more insistent. "Hey, Eli, come here, son. Look what I found." I felt frozen in place. I knew whatever was speaking to me wasn't my father. My pulse hammered in my ears as I lifted my rifle and fired a shot straight into the air. Then, without hesitation, I ran. As I sprinted toward my car, I racked another round, ready to fire if needed. Whatever was in those woods was chasing me. I could hear it getting closer with every step. I burst out of the tree line and threw my rifle into the Mustang. I turned for a split second, and that's when I saw it. The thing stood at least 8 feet tall, unnaturally thin, with legs that bent in the wrong direction. Its pale, decayed skin looked like it was peeling off. Where eyes should have been, there were only hollow black voids, and its mouth was stretched into an unnatural grin that sent a wave of terror through me. I didn't wait. Slamming my car into reverse, I tore out of there, gravel flying behind me. I haven't been back since, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will. That year, it was the first night of spring break, and I decided to go tent camping with my dad in a wooded area of southern Arkansas. I had a large knife with me, so I wasn't too uneasy. We set up camp, relaxed by the fire, and eventually turned in for the night. Everything felt normal until later. I woke up around 12:30 to the sound of a dog barking wildly at something. At first, I was just irritated. It was late, and we were trying to sleep. On top of that, I had one of the worst headaches I'd ever experienced. A few minutes later, I noticed that the entire forest had gone completely silent except for that one dog. I'm not an experienced camper. I'd only camped a couple of times before, but even I knew that when the woods go quiet, something is out there. That's when I started feeling uneasy. As I tried to force myself back to sleep, I suddenly heard something else, a sound unlike anything I'd ever encountered. It was somewhere between a mountain lion, a woman screaming, and a horse letting out a shrill whinny. The sound repeated, and at that moment my dad suddenly sat up, only to pass out again right after. No surprise, really. I had told him 4 beers were too much. The strange sound continued for about 20 seconds before stopping altogether. I knew for certain it wasn't a mountain lion. I'd heard those before on past trips, and this sounded much more unnatural. I tried to push the fear aside and eventually managed to fall asleep again. At around 3:15, I woke up to the distant sound of a rooster crowing. It was odd, given the time, and my headache had gotten even worse. Just as I started drifting off again, I heard another bizarre noise. At first, I thought it was a donkey braying, but then the sound deepened, turning into something that resembled a heavy smoker struggling for breath. I was so confused and in so much pain that I couldn't think straight. Needing some painkillers and a bathroom break, I groggily stumbled out of the tent. Looking back, that was a mistake. It had started to drizzle, but the rain felt thick, almost greasy, and had an odd metallic scent. That struck me as strange, but what came next was worse. As I relieved myself on a nearby tree, I heard movement from the same direction as the eerie donkey sound. I turned my head and saw something unsettling on the ground, a pile of what looked like rotting, raw deer meat. The moon was nearly full, so the clearing was well lit. Then, something came staggering out of the bushes. First, I thought it was a man, but as I got a clearer look, I realized it wasn't. Its skin was pale gray, its eyes were hollow, and it had no nose. It moved with a limp and didn't seem to notice me, but it was definitely not human. I stood frozen, hoping it would continue to ignore me. It bent down all the way to the ground and started devouring the decayed meat. Once it had finished, it turned back and limped into the trees, disappearing into the darkness. Strangely enough, I wasn't even scared in that moment. I was just in shock. My mind was racing. Was that a zombie? No, zombies aren't real. What was that thing? Now, looking back, I truly have no idea what I saw. I can't even begin to guess. And that's why I'm reaching out to anyone reading or hearing this. If you have any clue about what any of these strange events could mean, please let me know. I need answers because I have a feeling that all of these things were connected somehow.